What job should marketing get done in a company?
I think I have an answer that I've always believed in that I've always thought marketing was a like the greatest game ever invented, and the idea of it was to basically get people to take an action that they otherwise were not planning to take, right? So if you take that perspective, um, then I think it's all about levers and buttons and knobs and what can I twist, what timing can I manage, what messaging can I put together to try to get people to take this action.
That's Pat. And if you can't tell already, he is uber passionate about marketing, content, and as you find out later, Garth Brooks. Seriously though, Pat's energy came through way too hard, and most of his audio is hitting the max or peaking. I tried my best to make it bearable, but I do apologize for the poor audio, and sorry, Pat, for not being able to make you both look and sound amazing. Pat started his career as a marketing and public relations specialist for Cobaco, hopefully I'm saying that right, and 12 years later is back as a brand media director, and he's been there for the past 5 years. I find that to be super cool and kind of a common recurring theme throughout Pat's career. He has over 20 years of marketing experience and is also in a band if you're not yet sold on Pat's amazingness. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, but before we get back to it, run the intro. Welcome to On Marketing, a show where we uncover what marketing is. I won't tell you what to think, I hope you improve how you think about marketing and life. I'm Jordan Ogren, a marketing strategist by day and a podcast host by night. This was originally recorded on November 4th, 2025. All opinions shared in this podcast are the individual views of the hosts and guests, not those of their individual employers or associate organizations. This content is intended for informational purposes and should not be considered professional marketing or life guidance. Listeners act on the information provided at their own risk. Thank you for being here.
My thinking on that's evolved. I still think it is the greatest game ever invented. But what I've come to recognize is that it's more about people and it's more about audience than I ever gave it credit to before. So historically, when I viewed the job marketing should do, I kind of viewed it as that outcome was the end. The end result, the transaction was the end all be all. And when you think like that, it's a little like asking for the first or asking for marriage on the first date, right? It's all you're hyper focused on. What I've come to learn is that when you do it right, and this is really just as I've leaned into content marketing through my career, if you put the audience above and beyond everything and you put the audience first in everything you do, it will inform what channels you should be operating in. It'll inform what you should say when you should say it. So I now think that especially as marketing has evolved and as consumers have evolved, the biggest thing marketing can do is help to form a bond and a trusting relationship between a brand and its audience. Not necessarily its customers yet, but its audience. And if it does that job, all the other things it's intended to do and all the other things we expect from our marketing will happen naturally. Not unlike a relationship, right? If you do everything right, you'll get to the point where you could ask for engagement. You don't have to do it within 5 minutes of meeting.
Love how you touched on people because, or the fact that people, the person understanding your audience, not even just the customer, but the market, the audience, then leads into channels and all those things. And I like to say when you have a very bland audience, then most of your marketing becomes bland or vanilla, where the more specific, the more niche you are. And this was, I've heard another person I interviewed talk about that like niching down allows you to kind of more flavor or do more things, or it leads you to the activities, the channels you need to be on. Give me more context into how you think about that, of how the person understanding the audience really leads to a lot of the second order marketing things you're going to do to reach them and convert them or get them to take that action.
I don't think there's anybody who would tell you, marketer, consumer, or whatever station they play in it, that we don't have enough marketing. I don't think there's anybody that says, the one thing that's missing in my life is like more advertising messages, right? So we don't need more marketing, although that's the prescription so many businesses try to apply to it, right? Let's advertise to increase frequency. We got to hit them over the head. I think we need better marketing. I think the volume is fine. The volume is a little bit, and it's getting worse. I mean, that's from a content perspective too. As a content marketer, I have to talk to clients and myself sometimes out of frequency being the end all be all. Let's say, what if we put that time into quality? What if we put that time into diving in, really understanding the audience and creating marketing that speaks to their pain points, speaks to their needs, intersects with who they are as a person, because that steers the direction for you. So to me, it's so important and drives so many of the other things that you do, because if you can understand your audience in a way that your competitors have not, you can deliver something to them in a way that they never could. That's you could have the AI debate, et cetera, but nobody will ever understand humans the way a human can if the human applies themselves to doing it. We could all have a surface level understanding of things and try to and that's the fast way to do it, certainly, and just try to solve that problem with volume. But I think in a world where we are just surrounded by marketing messages all the time, the companies that win, the brands who win, are the ones who do the work to identify, what makes their audience tick and creates messaging and leverages the channels to reach them where they are, and also iterates on that. And I think that's where a lot of marketers kind of blow it too, is they develop a plan, they put the plan into market, and then they go, the job is done, and the job is really just getting started when you go to market, because that's where you find out if you're right. Uh, Hopefully, and then and what part about what you did was wrong, right? So I think starting with audience and really knowing and understanding who you're trying to reach and what they care about will drive everything else and should drive all your decision making after that.
Yeah, well, I would just say from the interactions I have with clients or different things, that's almost always, if they have an idea, we want to go on TikTok, I'm always using that question as a positive, like, who are you trying to reach? And are they there, or is there some way? So I think that's so important. I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say the one closest to the customer wins. I read a book from 1999 that talked about kind of like markets or conversations and trying to be kind of close to that conversation, or in a sense, reality. I would love for you to maybe share one thing you've changed your mind on in understanding audience or audience development. Is there like not a new way, but is there something you used to do that now you have a slightly different approach? For me, for example, it was always like pains and all these things, and then I came across jobs to be done thinking, I'm like, oh, there's like jobs that we hire for, and there's pushes and pulls, and it just opened up a whole new world. What for you, maybe have you changed your mind on or slightly altered with audience development or getting to know the audience? Is there anything you do differently?
I think that the biggest thing I do differently is because of the tools that are available to me now. So the great example that I've got is, historically, if you've tried to understand the audience for, and particularly for a product that you don't use yourself, or that you don't, that is not, in your wheelhouse, or that you are not the audience for, what we historically did was you had two options. You could either dive in deep and do focus groups and customer interviews and things like that. That stuff's expensive. It takes time, especially when you're, in an agency environment like I am. Sometimes you just can't get access to your clients' customers the same way that you could maybe in-house. But I've been in-house too, and it's still difficult there to dive in, and even then, the perspective that you get is the perspective they want to give you. So in a focus group, in a customer interview, for instance, people will not always answer honestly. Now, the coolest thing about being alive now, and really for the last 10 years, is that people are tribing up on the internet. The people that you want to reach, likely there is a group of them somewhere. And I'll give you a great example. For a lot of years, I sold real estate education. I was a marketer for real estate education for Capital Professional, which is the test prep company. And in that position, I didn't, I'd never taken any real estate classes. I obviously was not a real estate salesperson. I didn't really have any close family or friends at the time that were real estate professionals, and I didn't have insight into the mind. I had surface level understanding, which I didn't say, but that is the other option that you have. You could do the deep dive focus group stuff, or you could paint a picture in your brain of what you think a real estate agent cares about and is like, right? But what I started to discover through online forums in the early days of this, um, social media groups, LinkedIn groups, and Facebook groups, if you can get yourself into, and the more niche, the better, especially if they're active. So, I found a group called Agents Online on Facebook at the time, and I got into Agents Online, and it was all real estate agents and then me. I just pictured myself sort of standing in the back of the room, feverishly taking notes as they had conversations. And the stuff they talked about were the things that really matter to real estate agents. How do I have a tough conversation with another agent I'm working with on the other side of this transaction who isn't returning calls, isn't representing their clients the best, whatever, right? Um, I'm at this level and I need to get to this level. What did you do to break through that barrier as a real estate agent? And there, it's wisdom of the crowds. They're helping each other. They're having discussions, real life human discussions, and they don't know I'm watching. It's the best part. They think they're among only themselves. So um, and they made jokes. There was entire real estate industry memes that they wouldn't share publicly because their clients would see them, right? But they would share them with each other because there was that shared bond, that experience. You got to know even what their sense of humor was, what annoyed them. You name it, right? You could get a real insight if you listen to the people who you want to reach, talk to each other. When they talk to each other, they're the most the most honest representations of who they are, and it gives you the opportunity to better understand them and to shape your marketing for them. So when you talk about change, it's not necessarily a change that I've made because I've matured and understood, like, oh no, I've been doing this all wrong. It was recognizing that there are, in some ways, better and more efficient ways to get inside the mind of your customer than the historical practices of having to sit down and have conversation after conversation and even then, those are snapshots with one person in the group.
I love that you say that because I think our actions and our words are always slightly different. Like I say a lot of things that I want to do, but I don't
Right.
always follow through. So I think that even
Yeah.
is its own in product development is actually watching users use the product versus just asking them questions because they may say something that doesn't align. And I love that literally you took that thought of markets are conversations, which then the next thing is like rather than demanding people come to your conversation, you go and join the conversation that's happening or you silently take notes in the back. Regardless, though,
Or you
you had
creep
the
them out,
humility, but you had that humility to listen. And I find so much that listen is that key thing of like just being open to be like, I have bets, I have hypotheses, but we're going to go and try to get closer to reality versus just being like, this is how they talk. And it's like, I don't know if that's true. So I really like that you opened that up.
And I'll tell you what, Jordan, I have not been in the real estate marketing industry, real estate education marketing industry for 5 years. I'm still a member of Agents Online because
Wow.
they are some snarky people, and man, it is fun. So I still sit back and watch what they talk about because it's a good time.
That's awesome that you're still a part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, they made it. When this gets out there, I may get booted, but for right now, I'm still a part of it.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident they won't be listening to on marketing. But if they do, I
All right,
apologize.
fingers crossed. Yeah.
All right, Pat, are you ready to switch to maybe the more important topic of life? Are you ready to dive into that?
Absolutely. Let's go get it.
Awesome. What job should we be aiming for in life? Or put simply, what's the point of life?
Well, that's a pretty simple question, isn't it?
A
You want
sentence,
the
maybe?
Do you want the 180 character version, or you?
How about the thesis?
I'm not so ignorant as to believe I've got it all figured out. But what I do believe is that I'm here to earn the right to something better when it's over. So the question becomes, how do you earn that? And as best I can tell, I think we're all here to make each other's lives better, to bring out the best in each other. So through our words, through our actions, through our work, through our art, through whatever we're putting out in the world, um, I think the measure of a life well lived is probably the impact you've had on other people. This is a theme, I guess, to this conversation. But part of that is understanding, what people need and being what people need when they need it. You hope that shows up in how you act as a husband, as a dad, as a son, as a brother, as a friend, as a neighbor. Knowing that it's intrinsically difficult because I think humans, I say this in marketing all the time, but humans are naturally selfish. We can't help it because our inner dialogue we have with ourselves is constantly, not the words that we use, but the inner dialogue we all have with ourselves is often revolved around, oh my gosh, how am I going to look if I say that? What do they think of me? Does this shirt look stupid? Like all those inner dialogue, it's all about us. So to pivot that and to dedicate thought to other people and actions to the service of other people, because I think, no matter how you think we got here, you know, whatever you prescribe to, I think this applies no matter what. The one thing you can't deny is we are not here alone. We're here with others. So what is the purpose of the grand experiment if there are not if we are not here to create positive interactions with other people? I think that's part of the reason that we're here. So I fail every day at that, but I also strive to do it all the time. And I think it's what we're here to do. And we all know none of us were born perfect. So I think it's in the striving that we get as close to perfection as we can get.
Yeah, the term is missing me, but there's this concept that, to your point, we all wake up realizing that like the world revolves around us, but we all have that same exact thought. And that realizing that helped me open up of I have two choices. Be the best star person in my movie. Just focus on my movie. It's all about my movie. Or I have thousands and thousands of other movies going on that I can be a supporting actor. I can be the second best actor, or I can be the 54th. I have 1 second in their scene. And someone told me one time about Charlie Sheen. He had a movie that he was in for like 20 seconds, and that was kind of like some reason the review focused on him, and that blew him up because he just
Right.
did as well as he could in those 20 seconds. And that's that thought of like, it's not to use it for my own, because then that's selflessly selfish, which is maybe good, but it's not that great. But like realizing that it's like my value is far more valuable in others' movies of just being that side character or a very supporting actor. So that aligns so much with what you're saying. But I'd love to know, what got you to believe that? What moment, a word that comes to mind is selfless. Like, how did you realize? Because as children, to your point, it's like, it's all about me. I'm just trying to solve my own things. Where, when, how did you get to this realization that like, maybe it's about being serving and not being served? Like maybe the goal is to serve.
Yeah, I think what the kids are calling it these days is main character energy. I think right
Wow,
when you
Pat, you
got
got
that.
you got yeah,
I
you're on
got you.
more on trend than me. I
I'm with
appreciate
it,
it.
man. I'm with it. It only took to get to my mid 40s to know what was up with the next generation. That's gonna be hilarious to anyone who knows me because I don't have that figured out. I don't know for certain the answer to that question. What I can tell you is I can focus on it from a the guitar behind me is not just a prop. I know how to play it, kind of. I mean, I've been playing it for most of my life, but I'm not great at it. But I do perform publicly for people. So when I started out, and it gives me a lot of joy. I get a ton of joy from being able to do it, from writing songs, from playing music and things like that. But particularly with performance, when I started out, I think as a young person, like first getting out and performing when I was a teenager, I think I was doing it for me. That's quite honestly and selfishly, I think I was doing it exclusively for me. In that I like how this makes me feel. I like how going out and performing a talent that I've developed, and when people appreciate that, how that makes me feel. But it was still very much about me. A part of that is just being a teenager. I think there's an innate thing that when I talk about that loud voice that we have internally that's all about us, that voice, and it's not their fault, it's hormonal, it's part of adolescence and growing up, is you are the center of the universe in your brain. You just got to reach a point where you break that. But what I've noticed as I've gotten older in performing music, um, is that I'm no longer exclusively seeking, or even primarily seeking, validation from an audience, in that feels good, they're applauding for me. And what I've found is I am more in pursuit of connection. So how can I, and I take that approach with writing songs, and it makes it harder to write songs, right? Because you try to reach into other people's hearts. So I don't write as many songs as I used to. Hopefully I'm writing better songs, but I find it in writing songs, I find it in performing, in that something that I gleaned from a guy that I idolized as a young kid growing up, which was Garth Brooks. Something that I gleaned from him the handful of times I got to go see him perform was that it didn't matter where I was sitting in the arena. I swore at some point in that show that he looked at me, that he made eye contact with me, and that there was a feeling of like, hey man, I don't know about the rest of these people, but you and I get it, right? Like that was, and I don't know how you do that in an arena full, or at least I didn't know how you did that in an arena full of 60,000 people or whatever, right? So then I got the opportunity. By the way, Jordan, I don't have any short stories, so
They're my
I got
favorite.
the, I got the opportunity to go see Garth Brooks in the front row. My wife and I scored front row seats probably 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. Sitting in the front row, I had a very different experience than I'd had at any other concert. I had sat in the nosebleeds. I had sat behind the stage, we're up high. I'd sat over here, over there, but I'd never sat there. And he didn't look at me once in the front row. And I think what I recognized was he knew the people up front were already having an experience. They were going to get to see stuff in a way that not a lot of people get to see. He didn't need to take care of them as much as he needed to take care of that guy up there. So I started watching him then and watching how he worked a room and watching how his eyes moved around and watching how I knew, having been on stage in my life, I knew he could not see individual audience members in certain areas of this arena because it's black. If you get past 15 rows, it's pitch black. You can't see anybody. But he made it his mission to connect with everybody so that they all felt like they had front row seats. Now that applies in performance, but it also applies in how we treat other people in our personal daily interactions. Is how do you make everybody you meet feel like they had a front row seat for whatever the experience was, right? So again, I can't pinpoint a moment in time, but I can tell you something that I learned by watching him was how to hopefully make everybody in the room feel important, valued, and like they're part of it, not just like they're watching.
There's a lot of legs to that, Pat, that I
There
could
was.
take in different ways. I just love the fact of kind of, you didn't say this, but I think there's a ultimate joy in there's joy in being seen. But then there's the ultimate joy in helping another individual be seen. And I think like wrapped into what you're talking about is that, and also like this fact of life, which is funny because I think there's 40, 50-year-olds that haven't, whether you just had this kind of frog in the hot water, eventually you get there, which is a lot of us. I'm hopefully similar, where I'm slowly getting there, opening my world of like, it's not all about Jordan. There's more joy in serving and than being served, and using my own models of, whether that's Jesus, of washing feet, rather than kind of being the one of like, I want to get so successful that everyone's washing my feet. It's like, I want to get
Right.
so successful I can wash someone's feet. And just in that act of someone at their level, the Son of Man, Son of God, washing your feet is like just the ultimate joy, or ultimate kind of like peak experience. And I love that, especially too, your point on like the Garth Brooks looking past the front row, or that was a very unique thing. And I have this mental model or way I live where I view a circle, and this is always from like a religious point of view, that in the circle is like the real religious people. It's kind of the party. And then obviously like outside the circle is however you want to frame them, just people not in it. I've never, living in church, have been able to go to the center of the circle. I've maybe dipped my foot there, but it like was always pulling myself back to the edge and kind of pulling people in to say, you're not really seen by the people in the center of the circle because they're having a great time, but someone needs to pull you in, and someone needs to see you and kind of hug you and bring you into this. And it aligns kind of microcosmically with what you're just saying of, there's probably a lot of people I don't do that to because they're way more seen or whatever, where I'm always trying to feel the ones or see the ones that I think are being overlooked or not seen. So I really like that story.
And I think you can take that from a religious perspective, but you can take it into almost anything that you do. In that, I think we as a society would be better off if we all hung out closer to the edges of our circles, whatever circles we're in, um, and welcomed people because we all know what it feels like. We've all had experiences in our life and know what it feels like to not be welcomed in, to not feel like you had a place, even though you felt like you had something to contribute. Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I like that idea of the edge of the circle.
Well, I think historically, death was on the rejection, right? If I wasn't accepted to the community or the tribe, I probably faced death in the wilderness on my. So
Right.
there's I think this like almost like, which is why I think a lot of these truth, whether it's the Bible or others, don't directly, but they kind of put it. I didn't come for the rich. I didn't come for the healthy. I came for the sick. I came for the poor, because I've had so many convos. I recently had a child, almost a year, and there's this thought of like, if I only love my child, there's another child who doesn't have a mother or father that is as involved or is dealing with other things. So then there's this huge net of undesirables that just don't. So my thought is always like, yeah, I want to love Lennon, my daughter, but the biggest gift is actually showing her I can love another kid just as much as I love her, and then she can go and do that same thing elsewhere. So no, I love that kind of thought. But to bake another question here, Pat, this is one of my favorite questions I like to ask. It's baked into the movie Inception. So if you haven't seen that, I'll give a real quick spoiler. But in the movie Inception, they go into people's dreams and incept kind of nefarious dreams. So then the person either sells their company or does something, but they believe that dream or whatever was incepted to be their own thoughts. We're going to turn that to more of a positive angle, Pat, and you get the opportunity outside of marketing, forget marketers, you get the opportunity to incept an idea into every human mind. So tomorrow morning we wake up and your idea we incept, we believe to be our own, and we live out of in full. What idea are you incepting to all Americans or all humans?
Wow, it's a big one.
That's all we got today,
We're gonna
Pat.
stick
Big
with the theme.
questions.
It's all we got is big ones. Yeah, we're gonna stick with the theme. I would love to accept the idea because I think people care a lot about legacy. So I'd love to accept the idea that the only thing that people on Earth will remember you by is work you did to improve somebody else's life. Your only legacy, the only thing that anybody will ever remember you for, is what you did to bring out the best in somebody else. Because think if we all believed that to be true, what kind of a world we would be living in. The idea of being able to, get into people's dreams. My first mind went to the Pat Waters Band is the greatest country band on the face of the earth. But once
Yep,
again,
subscribe.
selfishly serving, right? Right. So I've matured and I backed up, and I realized the real answer is about service to others. And I think if you could plant that seed in everyone's head, it would, and imagine that drove all of our thoughts, all of our actions. What a different world we'd be living in.
It's funny you mentioned that, Pat. I also would enjoy to live in that world, but I also think there's a truth that kind of makes what you just said almost like accurate or true is the fact that while we all want legacy, like name one person from the Sumerian Empire, or like whatever these empires were 100, 500, 700 years ago. It's like you can't remember the most important person in society because they are just a blink in kind of time. So I think the only value we have is helping those around us, because then they actually feel it and remember it in that moment, that now that we're all in together, rather than leaving a legacy of a big company or whatever that, like, if we're truly honest, like, no one will care about. But how we help others, they care about in the moment. So I think that
And there's
thought's
the
right on.
butterfly effect of that generations forward too. And what does that impact going forward if
So
you can
true.
touch other people's lives in a way that changes how they treat other people? I mean, it's really the ripple effect. I think makes a big
Yeah,
difference.
the 1 + 1 = 3. The ability to
Exactly.
kind of create something that wasn't there because you invested, you gave to someone. Yeah. No, I love that, Pat. Well, honestly, I probably should have just cut it at your point, because that was a perfect way to kind of end or put a bow on this podcast. So thank you so much, Pat, for coming on and sharing your stories. I loved every second of it.
Man, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. We appreciate it.
And this is the end of the podcast. What one idea or topic of conversation stood out to you today? Write it down, share it with a friend, post on social. The main thing is take action. That's how we go from theory to mastery. We need to practice. We need to put it into practice. Thank you for listening and being here, and I hope you tune in next week.